Hello, this is Fail Hamadi from Professor Kasha, Art Foundation 205. Today we'll be learning about watercolor and the different brushes, the difference between working on a regular printing A4 paper, a sketchbook paper, and watercolor paper. Also, I'll be showing you how to work wet on wet, wet on dry, dry with a dry brush, wash, lifting color from wash, gradient, spray, glaze, bleeding. Let's just activate our watercolor palette. So I'm going to spray it. You don't have to do this part, but I like to do this because it's easier for me than just having the water can and then going with the brush back and forth. So we let it activate so it absorbs the water and it's easier for us to work on later. So I'm just gonna leave it down here for now. So I have here 3 different type of papers: A4 printing paper, sketchbook paper, watercolor paper. I've cut them into strips so they can fit in the frame and you can hopefully see them, but we're gonna be using just the regular size. So we're going to start with wet on wet. Basically wet on wet means that your paper is already wet and you're just dipping in the color and adding it to your paper. So we're just gonna start by adding water into our paper, just a square for example, and then we can just dip our brush in the watercolor and add it on top. So do you see how it affects it? So we're gonna do that for all of them. Sorry, my brush was already dipped in paint. Then you can just clean off your paintbrush, just like that. And now we're going to do wet on dry. So basically wet on dry means your paper is already dry and your brush is wet. So that's how you're going to add the color. We're gonna wet our brush again, dip it in color. Let's try the red. And then we're going on a dry paper and we're adding our color. You can already tell the pigmentation of the color on each paper, how it's different. And for now we're gonna try the flat wash. So you just clean off your brush and then re-dip it in the water and just choose your color. So for example, I'll choose the orange. You need to dip your brush in water with enough paint so it creates a bead at the end. If you can see the paint at the edge of the brush, then you start by adding the color and you move it slowly to the end. And we're gonna do that again on all of the papers. And now we're gonna try the color bleeding method. Again, just to clean up your brush, dip it back in water, choose your color. For example, here I'm doing the green, so just go on with the green, and then you can just go back with another color. Let's do the red again and you're gonna do it from the bottom up so the color bleeds into each other's. So we're gonna do that again for the rest of them. Now we're gonna try the gradient blend. So again, just dip your water, choose your color, and just go slowly so you can see how your color is dark and then it's going lighter. If you feel the need to go back just to make it better, you can try now the layers. So just again clean up your brush, choose your colors, do a square of a color. So to just not have to go back and clean it every now and then, we're gonna do the same color in a square on every paper, just to avoid cleaning the brush every time. And then you go back with another color, let's just do the green, and you go on it and then you layer it on top. So you can see that the color before wasn't totally dry, so it bleeded on top of it, but if you let it dry you'll get a different result. So I'm gonna show you when it's dry and when it's wet. So let's just do the rest of the papers we have. And now we're gonna just do a square in here for the layers and leave it to dry, and we'll come back to it later on when it's dry. So while we're waiting for the this one to dry, let's just try another thing. So we're gonna try how to do the bleeding method, but on just a wet on wet, so it's bleeding and wet on wet at the same time. So you just load your paper with water and then you go in with a different with a color, and you just bleed it into your paper, and that's going to create a different shapes. So let's just do that for the rest of them as well. So you can see how the bleeding went on each paper differently, even though we've used the same brush, the same paint, the same amount of water and everything. So let's just try marks. We're going to make some random marks on here. So just dip your water again, choose your color. I'm going to go with the dark green. So just try to play with your flat brush. So if you go like this, it's going to be to create a harder shape. Then if you go just by the edge, it's going to make smaller shapes. So play with it to figure out what you can do with just one flat brush. And that's how you make different marks with just your good old flat brush. Also, we can explore with the texture salt. So here I have a puddle of salt on me. I'm just gonna keep it here and go with our brush. I create a box of color. So let's try the blue. You don't need a lot, just a little. And just let it dry. We can also see that the box we've already created before is already dry. Let's just go choose a color, a different one. So I have the red one here, and go make a layer of box on top of it. So you can see how you can see the different color underneath it, because in watercolor you have to make sure that you're doing it the right way, or you're just gonna mess up, and your mistakes underneath are going to show. It's different than acrylic color. So I've done it to all of them. We're going to create texture with a tissue. If you have kitchen napkins, it's going to be better because they have texture, but here I have just regular napkins. So we just clean off our brush again, choose our color, and create a box of color. So I'm doing the green. I'm just gonna do it down here. Here I have the tissue, and I'm just going to dip it in. Looks like I don't have enough on here, or it has dried or something. So I'm just going back, and just like that. So to create a different texture. And let's go back to our first boxes and do the dry on wet method. So if I dip into it, it's not bleeding, it's just giving me like little dots instead. So that's the dry on wet, and the other one with the bleeding is the wet on wet. So try the wet on wet and the dry on wet again, but in a different way. So let's just create again a box of color. I'm doing the orange up here. So since my color of boxes are already wet, we're going to do the wet on wet method. So we just dip in another color and go over it. So when you wanna choose another color and paint over it while it's still wet, the color is going to bleed through, so it's gonna spread everywhere and wouldn't give you a clean look. But if it was dry, so let's just do the same colors. If it was dry, you wouldn't have to go through that, and it's going to be a clean look. So we're just gonna create our boxes and let them dry and come back to them when they are dry. In the meanwhile, we're going to do another box to create a shape. so you can see better how it will affect it. So let's just do a wet on wet shape and a wet on a dry shape. So we're gonna let these boxes dry and do other ones. So here I'm going to work with the wet on wet. Let's choose red for example and go on our water brush and try to create a shape. You can see how it already started bleeding everywhere on the wet on wet, and it's harder to create a shape, while the wet on dry it's going to be much easier. So you can see how it's going smooth. Yeah, the glaze method. So we're going with our color, choose two different colors. Let's try the red and the orange, and we're just gonna create two lines. On each paper. And then we'll choose a different color. So I'm going with the orange and creating another two lines on top of it because it's already wet. So you can see how the colors are mixing together. So that's called glaze. You can try any technique you want in any color that you want. It's fine, just explore, and you can do them multiple of times just to get the hang of it. So for now, let's just try the spray method. So just choose your color. For example, I have here the blue, and you're just going to spray it like that. So you can see how it's creating different sperms. So that's good, for example, when you're trying to achieve a galaxy look or anything that's including type of small So this is what we have done so far, and here are some more examples of another student work. So this is my watercolor project. It's by Abdelkader Al-Reis, and here are more examples I have done just to figure out how can I do the layering and the colors. So yeah, enjoy and have fun.